Story 1. The Imposter Grandfather. I was only 7 years old that summer. My parents were both working constantly, each juggling 2 jobs to support me and my older brother, Cam, who was 8. Hoping to give us a joyful summer, they sent us to stay with our grandparents in the countryside. Their house stood in the middle of a vast field in Texas, right next to a dense forest. It was a peaceful, quiet place, completely unlike the noisy, smoggy city. Next to the house was an old tool shed, along with a small barn for chickens, cows, and goats. For a city kid like me, it felt like paradise. No school, no honking cars, only wind, grass, birdsong, and absolute freedom. But I had no idea that someone else had been waiting for me to return that summer. The first day passed calmly. My grandparents were gentle and kind. Grandpa showed us around the farm, while Grandma made the most delicious grilled ribs. That night, Cam and I shared a room with bunk beds and a TV. Around 2 a.m., I was still awake, watching cartoons, when I heard footsteps just outside the window. Slow, heavy, clear. I held my breath and turned toward the window, but the curtains blocked my view. Then I heard a light knock on the glass, followed by a low groan. I was frozen in fear. I quietly slipped into my grandparents' room and woke them up. They checked outside, but saw nothing. They told me I probably just heard an animal. It made sense given how remote the area was. I returned to bed, but my heart kept pounding in my chest. The next morning, Grandpa took us out to feed the goats and walk the family dog, Cora. I held the leash, but Cora kept pulling and staring intensely into a corner of the woods. I followed her gaze and saw a dark figure standing behind a tree. I couldn't make out the face, but I knew he was staring directly at me. I called for Grandpa, but by the time he turned around, the figure had vanished like smoke. Grandpa said it might have been a deer or a stranger passing by, but he didn't smile. He gently squeezed my shoulder, eyes full of concern. That night, Cam and I slept in the same room again. Around 1 a.m., I woke up to a strange humming sound, the theme song of a cartoon playing on TV. Then a voice came from just outside the window. "Hey, it's Grandpa. Come out, kiddo. I've got something really cool to show you." Half asleep, I got up and walked to the window, and there he was, my grandfather. He wore a hooded jacket that covered most of his face, but he reached out a hand, a familiar, calloused hand. I opened the door and took it, then followed him toward the old shed beside the woods. There were no lights, only moonlight and the sounds of insects. I asked, "Grandpa, where are we going? Why aren't you saying anything?" But there was no answer. Then I looked down at the hand holding mine. It wasn't Grandpa's hand. It was longer, paler, and younger. I looked closely at the figure walking in front of me. He was too tall, his build wasn't right, and there, barely visible on his back, was the faint glint of a long object, like the handle of an axe or a metal rod. My throat tightened. I couldn't scream, couldn't run. Just then, I heard Grandpa's real voice calling from the back door. "Kiddo, where are you?" The man in front of me turned toward the sound. In a single heartbeat, I yanked my hand away and stepped back. The man stood still for a moment, then bolted into the woods. I ran as fast as I could toward the house, screaming, "Grandpa, help me!" Grandpa caught me as I burst through the door. Grandma, trembling, was already on the phone with the police. Less than 30 minutes later, the officers arrived. They tracked the man down hiding in a hole near the forest. He had stolen a few items from the shed and was carrying an axe. After questioning, police discovered he was Dave, Michelle's ex-boyfriend. Michelle had been our babysitter back in the city. Dave told police that he knew Michelle adored me. He believed that if he kidnapped me, he could force her to come back to him. I didn't want to hurt the girl. I just wanted Michelle back. I just wanted to start over with her, he said, face emotionless. After that night, my parents came immediately and took me and Cam back to the city. They quit their jobs and found new ones closer to home so they could spend more time with us. Michelle, though it wasn't her fault, was let go. It took me years to stop fearing the sound of tapping on windows or the sweet voice of someone calling me by name. But I learned something deeply important. Not everyone is who they claim to be. Even if they call you by a name, only someone who loves you would know. Story 2, The Whistle at 1:17 a.m. After a bitter divorce at the age of 28, Evan had only one place to go, his late grandfather's old cabin in the woods. just outside the small town of Chatham, Alabama. It was a rustic wooden house sitting on more than 10 acres of forest land, about a 10-minute drive from town. No neighbors, no traffic, no one else around. Total isolation, something many seek for healing. For Evan, it wasn't ideal, but at least it was free. The house had a creaky wooden floor, doors that often jammed, and for some reason, no matter how high he cranked the heater, the place always felt unnaturally cold. Still, after a few quiet nights, Evan started to enjoy the absolute silence, just a cold beer and the sound of wind rustling through the trees each evening. Until the seventh night. That night around midnight, just as Evan was drifting off to sleep, he heard it. Wheat, wheat, wheat. A strange broken melody, off-key, faint yet unmistakably eerie. It wasn't a bird, it wasn't the wind, it was a whistle, human-made. At first, Evan assumed it was just a lost hunter or maybe a drunk passerby wandering through the woods. But the next night, the whistling returned. Same time, same tune, and it sounded closer. By the third, fourth, and fifth nights, the whistling came again, always at precisely 1:17 a.m. Not a minute earlier, not a second later, like a cursed ticking clock. Evan started to feel that something was seriously wrong. He went outside with a flashlight, scanned the trees, the yard, but saw nothing. No footprints, no movement, just the whistle, echoing deep into the woods, then fading. A chilling thought began to settle in his mind. Someone was watching him, and they knew he lived alone. Terrified, Evan called the local sheriff's office. An older deputy, Deputy Hay, paid him a visit. When Evan explained what was happening, the man's expression changed. His voice dropped to a low, serious tone. Your grandfather, he reported the same thing, Deputy H said. Every spring, he'd call in about whistling around the house at night. We never caught anyone. Back then, we figured old age was making him paranoid. But now, you're hearing it too? That night, Evan locked every door. He barricaded windows with chairs. He even wedged a chair under the handle of his bedroom door. Still, the whistling came. At first, behind the house, then on the porch, then beneath the floorboards. It sounded like it was crawling through the vents, humming up from the basement, a place Evan had never dared to enter. He didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, desperate, Evan dug through his grandfather's old journals. In one of them, he found a shaky, handwritten entry. It comes every spring. Each night, it gets closer. Once, I almost saw it by the back door. I sleep with my gun now. One day, I fear it'll come inside. That night, Evan stayed up with a shotgun across his lap. The hallway light remained off, and right on time, 1:17 a.m., the whistling began again. But this time, it wasn't from the yard. It came from inside the hallway, just a few steps from his bedroom door. Evan jumped to his feet, heart pounding, and yelled, "Who's there?" The whistling stopped. He flicked on the light. No one, no movement, no running footsteps, nothing. The house fell back into silence. For the next few nights, everything was oddly calm, but Evan didn't feel safe. Then, on the third night, he was jolted awake at 1:17 a.m. by a slow knock, 3 times on the back door. Then, creak. The hallway floor groaned, as if someone was slowly walking toward his bedroom. Evan grabbed his gun, opened the door, just as the hallway light shut off, and at the end of the hallway stood a figure, tall, dressed in black, skin pale as bone, motionless, staring directly at him. Evan shouted and raised his gun, his hands trembling. The figure turned and bolted out of the house, heavy, dragging footsteps echoing across the floor. Evan gave chase and fired once into the darkness, unsure if he hit anything. The next morning, the police returned. The front door stood wide open. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks. Deputy H inspected the scene and confirmed the intruder had used a key, his grandfather's key. Nothing was stolen, nothing destroyed. But the deputy looked Evan dead in the eye and said, "I'm not putting this in the report, but you need to leave. Something or someone in those woods doesn't like anyone living in this house. Not your grandfather, not you." That very day, Evan changed the locks, packed his bags, and left the cabin for good. His family later decided to sell the property. Evan never saw the whistler again. But deep down, he knows it's still out there, lurking in the trees, waiting for 1:17 a.m., waiting for someone new to move in. Story 3, the peppermint field that didn't exist. I'm 24 now, but every time I close my eyes, I can still remember the eyes, the voice, and the footsteps chasing me through the forest all those years ago. Back then, I was only 7, living in a tiny village with fewer than 100 residents. In that place, everyone knew everyone. We even remembered each other's license plates, because strangers were an incredibly rare occurrence. It was one of those blisteringly hot summer days. My best friend, let's call him Julian, and I were wandering around the village, hoping to find enough loose change to buy 2 cold cans of Coca-Cola. As luck would have it, an old lady who lived nearby called us over. She was preparing a birthday gathering and wanted to make peppermint tea for her neighbors, but she had run out of mint and asked if we could help her pick some. "If you fill up 2 bags with mint leaves," she said, "I'll buy you as much Coca-Cola as you want." Julian and I agreed instantly, partly for the soda, partly because we didn't want to face questions from our parents about where we got money to buy sweets. We split up and started foraging around the usual bushes and gardens, but after more than an hour in the heat, we barely had a handful of wilted leaves. The sun was scorching the tops of our heads, our shirts soaked with sweat. Julian grew visibly irritable, and I wasn't much better. We were close to giving up. That's when they appeared. 2 tall men, maybe around 5'7", but to 2 7-year-olds like us, they looked like giants. They were both wearing black hoodies and tight pants, their faces shadowed by their hoods. But their voices were strangely sweet, unnervingly gentle. "Hey kids, where are you off to? Looking for some mint, aren't you?" I nodded eagerly and explained everything. About the Coca-Cola, the old lady, the plastic bags. One of them bent down, patted my head, and smiled kindly. "How cute. What a coincidence. There's a huge peppermint field just behind that hill over there. Want us to show you?" I nodded without hesitation, my eyes lighting up like flashlights finally finding batteries. But Julian didn't smile. He looked at me, wide-eyed, and gently tugged on my sleeve, like he was trying to say something. But I didn't understand. I thought he was still upset about the mint hunt being a bust. Then the second man asked, "Who are your parents?" In our village, that wasn't just a question about names. It was how people identified your family roots. Everyone was tied together through generations. Julian replied quickly, "I'm Berto's grandson, and my friend here, he's Tilda's grandson." The man said nothing. No nod, no "oh I see," no greeting. They just kept looking at me, only at me, ignoring Julian completely, unbothered by anything else. "Come on, it's just a short walk to the field." So we started following them. The hill they mentioned was familiar. It was where kids from the village played hide and seek in the evenings. But I swear I had never seen a peppermint field there before. As we walked, the village slowly disappeared behind us. I tightened my grip on Julian's hand, which was now trembling. Then Julian suddenly leaned in, whispering sharply into my ear, "Something's wrong. Run." I didn't ask questions. Julian grabbed my hand and bolted. I heard one of the men curse loudly behind us, then the heavy thuds of footsteps chasing us. But Julian never let go. We ran like mad, down the hill, through over 2 kilometers of forest, our legs shaking, hearts ready to explode. I was crying. I didn't dare look back. I didn't know if they were right behind us. I only knew we had to survive. We had to make it back. When we reached the old lady's house, we were drenched in sweat, faces ghostly pale. She pulled us inside, gave us each a piece of chocolate, and asked what happened. Julian told her everything from start to finish. I couldn't speak. Not a word. After that day, Julian wasn't allowed to go outside for a whole month. As for me, it took a long time to recover. I never found out who those men were, where they came from, or what they wanted. But thinking back now, how one of them stroked my hair, smiled so softly, stared so intently, I'm sure their intentions weren't simply about giving us free soda. Maybe they'd done this before. Maybe we were the lucky ones. Years had passed, but Julian and I still talk about that day sometimes. Not like a memory, but as a warning burned into our bones. This world holds darkness that you don't need a flashlight to see. Sometimes, the warmest smile hides the coldest intent.